Winding along the Little Calumet River, the Heron Rookery Trail offers a serene out-and-back stroll through one of the Indiana Dunes National Park's more secluded locations. It is an ideal spot for birdwatchers, fishing enthusiasts, and those seeking a peaceful walk through the woods. The Heron Rookery Trail gets its name from the magnificent great blue herons that once nested here.
Back in the 1980s and 1990s, a large amount of great blue heron did use this area to nest. After, 2 decades of bird poop building up on the trees that they were living in, started to die. And so the heron actually left to find greener pastures, per se.
This area was once home to over 100 nests. While the majestic birds no longer call this particular area home, the woods are a haven for other bird species, including woodpeckers, owls, and migrating warblers, including the yellow-bellied warbler and American redstart.
This river is very important because it attracts very specific type of birds, like you are not going to see in the middle of the dunes, for example. You have riparian birds like kingfishers and wood dogs. This place is a little bit retired from the dunes, so it's not directly influenced by the wind of the lake, and that makes it kind of protected. And the trees here are also different from other trees that you can find in the park. Here we have more like a beech and maple forest.
The land along the riverbank is an ideal location for sycamores, which do best in damp conditions. The sycamore's distinctive peeling bark reveals striking trunks and branches of ivory that almost gleam in the sunlight. The Heron Rookery is also an ideal location for visiting anglers. During the spring and fall months, fishers can spot salmon and trout swimming in the Little Calumet River.
Some of the fish species that you can find here are the non-native like salmon, and you can also find native fish like white sucker and the green sunfish.
The water is actually clear enough that if you were just hiking the trail, if you stop and take a minute to look in the river, quite often you can see pretty large fish swimming in the river.
The Little Calumet River is part of the larger Calumet River system flowing through Illinois and northwest Indiana. Over the centuries, it has been a vital waterway for the native Potawatomi tribe. The river also played an important role in the development of heavy industry in the region. As both business and the population grew, the river underwent significant changes and challenges as runoff and pollution harmed large stretches of the river.
Before the Little Calumet River was channelized and ditched, we actually would have been standing up on the higher ridge here. When we have a storm event, the river pushes against the riverbanks here. It rises pretty quick, which triggers this erosion, also triggers trees to fall into the river. If all these trees were removed, that would likely trigger an acceleration of the velocity or the speed that the river is flowing, which ultimately would cause more erosion along the shoreline, which would then trigger more trees to fall into the river and also loss of the near shore.
In recent years, the National Park Service, along with continual efforts by volunteers and government and park officials, have worked to restore this important tributary. Today, visitors who hike along the riverbanks on the Heron Rookery Trail can see signs of the river's strength, along with the beauty it brings. In low-lying areas like this one, the water overtops the banks during the early spring months, flooding the landscape. As the sun filters through the bare tree branches, it warms the nutrient-rich soil, and an astonishing array of wildflowers make the most of these perfect conditions.
So Indiana Dunes National Park is known for its remarkable biodiversity. It is number 7 among national parks in number of species of vascular plants. It's number 5 in total biodiversity. It's number 3 in density of plants. So in a really small area, you can find just an incredible number of different plant species. Even just right here at the Heron Rookery, right off trail, we have wild geranium, violets. This looks like some type of aster. And then just right across the trail here on this other side, we've got some Solomon seal. This looks like a cutleaf toothwort that's finished blooming, some hepatica.
The Heron Rookery is a mix of bottomland forest and mesophytic forest, which basically is a very, very dense canopy of trees with this rich diversity of spring ephemeral plants.
Areas haven't been heavily grazed, so we still have this deep remnant soil that has all this life. And in this life, we get a variety of these wildflowers.
It's so surprising when you walk around here, you feel like you're in a fairy tale because you're surrounded by so many types of different flowers.
Heron Rookery is probably the best place in the national park to come and enjoy the spring ephemeral wildflowers.
So this is Trillium grandiflorum. Trillium grandiflorum is one of the showiest spring wildflower. Trillium actually means tri-lily, 3 lilies. So this is one of our native buttercups. It grows more in wet areas. It has a toxin in it, so if you're picking it, could cause blisters. Dutchman's breeches. So it's called that because it looks like the pants of a Dutchman. So when this matures, the seeds will have that little fatty substance on it, so then the ants can come and take it down, get a nice protein and fat-rich diet while transplanting the seeds. This is Jack in the pulpit. If an insect comes in, if it's a male flower, it has a little hole in the bottom, where after it gets stuck in here, it can sneak out the hole in the bottom. And by doing that, pollen on itself. And then as it leaves, if it finds a female flower, it'll go in the female flower and kind of do the same thing, but guess what? There's no hole in the bottom. So that poor thing now is stuck in there, and what that does is it ensures pollination. A lot of what we've talked about is the lower herbaceous species, but once in a while we have to look up. And we don't have to look up high to see something as cool as American bladdernut. And it's got these bell-like, gorgeous flowers. They produce this really cool, called bladdernuts, because they have this papery sac with the seeds in it.
Within the national park, there's over 350 non-native plant species, but here at the Heron Rookery, there's only 11 documented non-native plant species. Things like garlic mustard and multiflora rose are two of the most aggressive non-native plants. If gone unchecked, garlic mustard has a great amount of potential to push out a lot, if not all, of the native plants that live here at the Heron Rookery. Even though the Park Service has been very successful in eradicating garlic mustard from this area, it's important for us to continue to monitor for a recurrence or a resurgence of garlic mustard.
Despite the threat of invasive species and previous disturbances such as logging, farming, and grazing, the flowers at Heron Rookery have continued to persist. However, they couldn't have continued to thrive without the help of their pollinators, which include ants, beetles, birds, butterflies, and bees.
In Indiana Dunes, we have over 200 different species of native bees. Of these 200 native bee species, probably the biggest, most conspicuous ones that you might see are bumblebees. And early springtime, a lot of the bumblebees that you're seeing, most of those are actually queen bees. They tend to be a little bit bigger and hardier. Those are the only members of the colony that survive the winter. On the smaller size, we have tiny, tiny, tiny little carpenter bees. They'll nest in stems of plants. There are mining bees that drill tunnels down underground. If you look really carefully here, you can see some of these tiny, tiny little holes. This is a really nice place for them to make their home because it's close to this nice patch of flowers here where they can forage. And the females are gathering pollen and they're taking it back to these nests. They're collecting that pollen, for nutrition for themselves, but also to feed their young. So leafcutter bees, they will go to a plant, like to a leaf, and they have these specialized mouth parts that are almost like scissors that they kind of cut like this, and they go up to the leaves and they will cut out these little pieces of leaves and they use those to line the nest.
All of those native bees are making a community, different species living in the same area. That makes the pollinator community. And that's what we're trying to study. What is the population of bees around here? What is the pollinator community looking like right now? Trying to see if we can use the eDNA, the environmental DNA that the bees left on the flowers while they were pollinating, to see if we can actually make kind of like an inventory of what bees visited what flowers.
All these different studies all contribute information and help inform management decisions. It lets us know if there maybe are some floral resources, some certain species of plants that are really important to bees, or what kind of habitats they really need, areas where we want to target restoration, areas where we want to remove invasive species, all those things. We made some bee houses. We kind of have the standardized design here with different sized holes to attract different species. It's an individual bee, mama bee, is going to go in there and she's going to go back a certain distance. She's going to build a cell and provision it with pollen. And then she's going to lay an egg in there, and then she's going to close off that cell, and then she's going to move on and do another one. We actually selected a number of spots, almost, I think, over 75 spots. And what we're interested in is understanding what habitats might be most important for the native bee community of Indiana Dunes National Park, especially with some of these areas in the park that there's less what we call connectivity. By restoring those areas in between those two habitats, we can connect those habitats, and we're not just extending the habitat for the native bees, but we're also able to connect the different populations of those bees. Reasons we want to have connections throughout the park is because they sustain larger populations, which that would allow for greater genetic diversity, which is for healthier, like, meta populations. A lot of people often wonder what they can do to help pollinators and native bees. So you can help by providing a pollinator garden and some habitat in your own garden. You want to have native plant species, so find species that are native to the Indiana Dunes region. We want to make Indiana Dunes National Park a great place for bees.
A few ways that you can get involved in protecting this special place or any other natural area is to be a responsible hiker and clean your boots off before you come into this or any other natural area. You can help us by becoming a volunteer, whether it's picking up litter or pulling invasive plant species or being a citizen scientist and helping us collect data and make informed decisions. And also staying on the trails is very helpful to reduce the trampling of different plants, and ultimately to take only photographs and memories so that these resources are here for our children and our children's children to enjoy.
At just over 3¼ miles of level terrain, the peaceful Heron Rookery Trail is an ideal location to enjoy the passing loveliness of wildflowers, the tranquil waters of the Little Calumet River, and the lasting beauty of the Indiana Dunes region.
Its beauty is undeniable. The floral resources, this carpet of wildflowers, the river, everything here is beautiful. It's important for the national park to protect this area.
The Indiana Dunes Discovery Trail is an incredible natural treasure, and you are an important part of ensuring its future. When you visit, be sure to follow all posted signs and instructions. Visit indianadunes.com to learn about all of the volunteer opportunities and spend time caring for this fragile environment. In addition to the National and State Park Services, a number of nonprofit agencies work tirelessly to preserve and protect the Indiana Dunes Discovery Trail habitats. Learn more about these important agencies and support their efforts with your charitable contributions. Finally, be a champion for the Indiana Dunes. Stay informed and use your voice to tell the story of this wonderful place. Help ensure that all visitors, the magnificent birds, the migrating butterflies, and friends from around the world can enjoy the Indiana Dunes Discovery Trail for generations to come. Check out the links below to get started.